took all of the books that I've read the entire year and I put them in a list, and I use this website that shows you two things at once and says to do like this thing better or this thing better, and over time it shows you enough versions and enough combinations that you can find out what your favorite is and what your least favorite is, and it gives you a list. And it turns out to not really be possible. I mean, I did it, but it was asking me questions like, did you prefer Moby Dick or Winnie the Pooh? And you're like, they're just not even comparable. So rather than give you guys a top 10 list of the top best books I read this year, I'm going to give you 6 brilliant books that are brilliant for different reasons. All right, so first I want to start off with, these don't count as part of the 6. I'm going to start off with 3 books that you've heard me talk about already. I know I said I couldn't rank them, but these are my 3 favorites. I'm just going to mention them and move on. Those 3 in no particular order: East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This was recommended to me by Matt over at Colosseum Books. I read it, I don't remember how quickly, but really fast. Like, it's like 600 pages, and I couldn't put it down. I mentioned this in my Substack where I recommend books recently, but it is basically one of the most like bingeable long books I've ever read. It feels like a classic, but it feels really readable. If you've ever asked the question, am I a good person who does bad things, or am I a bad person? This might be a helpful book for you, or at least an interesting book for you. Okay, I said I would move on. The Brothers Karamazov. Yeah, this is my first Dostoevsky, really my first Russian literature at all. Yeah, this one's denser for sure than East of Eden, but it's really, really terrific. It's going to stick with me kind of forever. But you've already heard about this. I will move on. I promise. Really good, life-changing. Recommend you read it. I have a video on it already, so you can watch that. And then probably my number 1 of the year, shocking to me that I only read it this year for the first time. It feels like I've read it my whole life, and that is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I've talked about this in so many videos, I'm not even going to mention it again. Walden, read it sometime. It's slow, it's good. Really recommend if you're looking for some winter reading, but not for everybody. Definitely has some slower chunks. So those are the 3 favorite books of the year. Now I'll talk about my other recommendations of these books that are brilliant for different reasons. So the first of the 6 books I'd like to recommend is called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals, by Oliver Burkeman. So the title of this one comes from the average weeks you could expect in your life, assuming you live to be about 80. You'll get about 4,000 weeks out of life. And depending on how old you are, you've already lived a bunch of those. So at face value, you might expect this to be like a typical time management book. Like, if you wake up at this time and you schedule your to-do list in a certain way, you can get everything done, right? No, this book actually says, it was really refreshing, the opposite. It says you only have so much time, and you cannot physically do everything that you'd like to do. Like, I'm recording this video right now, so I can't be scuba diving right now. I thought I really do that, but I can't be doing that, or mountain climbing or walking, because I'm doing this. And as much as I'd like to write books and design games and read every book that ever existed and spend time with my family and work out someday, I can't. You can't do all of those things. So he says, basically, instead of trying to optimize your day so you can do everything, which is not possible, he says you just have to accept that you can't do everything, and then you just pick the things you're going to do, and then you do those things. And so that was really helpful for me, and it's been helping me think about what sort of things do I want to spend time on as we come up on the new year. Okay, number 2, again, not in any particular order, but the next book I want to talk about is a short and thoughtful memoir that I think you will probably never forget if you read it. And it's called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Jean-Dominique Bauby. And I'm sure I'm going to probably not say his name anymore because I'm notoriously bad with French names. So the author of this book was an editor of a French magazine, and he had a health incident that left him completely paralyzed. So he wasn't able to move or speak at all, except he could wink one of his eyes. I think it's his left eye. But this book was composed in that state. So in the hospital, he wrote it in his mind and then dictated it letter by letter by blinking his one eye to his assistant. I might be making it sound like this book is a gimmick or something, like you should read it because of how he wrote it, but it's genuinely very touching. He kind of just writes a lot of short vignettes about his life and things he remembers experiencing and how he feels confined to his chair. One of the wonderful things I think books can do for you is help you and me get into the head of somebody else, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and this is a prime example of that. So The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, recommend. Very short, definitely emotional, just very interesting, honestly. Okay, number 3, short, pithy fiction. Franny and Zoe, or Franny and Zooey. I do not know. Franny and Zooey is a short story called Franny, and then a novella called Zooey, and they're packaged as a single book. I will not summarize this book for you. It's so short, a summary kind of would just give it away. To me, it read like a play. It was a lot of dialogue set in very minimal locations. So they're in a restaurant and they're in a house, and that's pretty much it. That's the best way I can describe it. It felt like I was watching a play. It's 170 pages, small pages, and the short story, Franny, at the beginning is only 37 pages, and honestly, that was my favorite part. So if you're strapped for time and you just want to read Franny by itself, and then pick up Zoe sometime, or Zooey sometime later, I totally recommend it. Okay, 3 more. This next one is called The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. And this one is a pretty heavy book. It's about the Vietnam War. This one was also recommended to me by Matt at Collism Books. So maybe give his channel a watch. If you're interested in these recommendations, you can get other ones from him as well. So this book was interesting to me because it asks the question, what is really the balance between story and truth? And how can a story be more true than the truth? Can this fictionalized version really get the truth across more than a list of facts can? It's written as a bunch of short sketches of different events in the war and time back home and things like that. It's got this really dark humor about it as these different people in the war make sense of what they're doing. I really think you should read it. It's pretty fantastic. I want to read one really wonderful passage from it. The author's reflecting at the end. The human life is all one thing, like a blade tracing loops on ice. A little kid, a 23-year-old infantry sergeant, a middle-aged writer, knowing guilt and sorrow. Yeah, Tim O'Brien, The Things That Carried, what makes a story, and what's the difference between story and truth, and how do they overlap and intertwine? Okay, so this next one is called From Lone Mountain by John Porcellino, and this is a collection, really, of zines, so these little independently distributed magazines that consist of comics and stories, and this is just a compilation of those from, I think, 2003 to 2007. And the comics and stories are just kind of from things that happened in his life. So they're not really comics in the sense of like a funny, it's not like Garfield. It's like his own, it's almost like a diary. And there's lists and there's fun illustrations and things like that. Some happy stories, some sad stories. It just felt like I had a friend for a couple of years. So I do recommend From Lone Mountain by John Porcellino, but definitely know it's not a conventional book. It's a collection of comics and stories. Oh, and this was recommended to me, I think in a blog post by Austin Kleon. So thank you, Austin. Finally, we have The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, and this was by far the heaviest emotionally book I read all year. Not the densest or hardest to read, but the hardest emotionally. It's about a little girl who is black and has brown eyes, and she wishes her eyes were blue, and she doesn't feel like she's beautiful. But it's not like a happy, encouraging story where like she learns that she is just beautiful. It's actually just a really tragic and kind of really hard to read story about a family that is kind of eating itself alive, people who are not nice to each other, and fathers not being good to their sons, and the cycle continuing. And it was a really hard read. I'm very glad I read it. I think I mentioned earlier that fiction and nonfiction, just books in general, can let you sort of understand and begin to empathize with people that you're not similar to. And I really have no crossover with the main character of this book, like era, ethnicity, gender, but it was really good to read. I wrote in the back of this book, powerful, horrible, I don't know how I feel, but I feel a lot. That was just my initial reaction as soon as I finished the book, that it was wildly overpowering. The prose is beautiful, the story is beautiful in a tragic way. And obviously when I said horrible, I don't mean the book is horrible. I mean, like, I felt, it was a really rough go, honestly. So recommend highly, but with the warning sticker attached, just that it is like, it's very emotional. It covers a lot of difficult subject material. Okay, I realized right as I was about to record this that I had pretty much picked exclusively books that were either moody or actually sad. So I'm going to end with just 2 books that I thought were like a little lighter, a little shorter. The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. This is probably one of my favorite comfort books. I read the abridged version a lot as a kid, and then this version growing up. And it has all my favorite things. It has animals, it has boats, it has descriptions of food, and then it has animals like fighting, like with like pistols, which I didn't know that I really liked that or needed to read it until I did. It's a children's book, but it's like a 1908 English children's book, which is just totally out there. It kind of alternates between like happy chapters, like, oh, like time for these animals to have a picnic, like you see on the cover, and then other chapters where it's like, oh, the Toad character went to jail because he was driving an automobile recklessly and caused a bunch of accidents, so he's going to prison. And you're like, okay, recommend. Happy, comfort, cozy book, springtime book. And then also I mentioned this one, I think, in the last video, but The Uncommon Reader by Alan Bennett, and this book, The Queen of England becomes a reader, and hijinks ensue. And it's just it's dry, it's funny, and has a lot to do with, what happened, why would you read? Why would you read a book? Which, if you've noticed, that's a question I ask myself a lot. Why do we read books? So recommend. It's short. Both of these kind of happy, cute, short books of different types. Both, I guess, set in England or the United Kingdom. So there we go. That's it. Let me know in the comments below if you stuck around this far. What are some books you enjoyed? Oh man, okay, no, I gotta do one more thing. There are other books that I like this year that I did not mention at all, and those are just things that are straight fiction, as in modern fantasy or something like that. I'm in the middle of The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Actually, this is so embarrassing. My tripod's not tall enough, so it's propped up currently on 3 of the Stormlight Archive books because they're so big. So there you go. But it's not because I don't like them. I'm in the middle of Oathbringer right now. I'm trying to catch up. Some of my friends are on Wind and Truth or whatever the most recent one is. And then also Red Rising. I'm in the middle of reading the Red Rising books. And Harry Potter. I read Harry Potter for the first time this year, and I loved that. So I don't mean to diss on modern fiction. I think that's all pretty terrific. And that is actually it. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you guys later. Cheers.